This Thunder team is historic in more ways than one, and it has an elite defense. And if defense wins championships, start planning the parade.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show at LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We're diving into yet another lopsided win for Oklahoma City as they beat the Chicago Bulls. They beat the Chicago out of the Bulls 145-117. The Thunder, I mean, you're just running out of ways to talk about this team. They're truly historic. And every game feels like the different verse, same as the first. 63-12. Sole possession of the second most double-digit wins in NBA history. One away from tying the 72 Lakers for the most double-digit wins in NBA history. And when you look at this Thunder team as a whole, it's hard not to just get lost in that history, get lost in what they're doing in the big picture of, man, this is a team that's had to battle through a lot of different obstacles. And from the outside looking in, it looks so smooth, right? It looks like a team who was the 1 seed last year after the Josh Giddey and Caruso trade, after the Hartenstein signing. Again, they were picked at the top of the conference to do it again, and they've done it. So it feels like they've just kind of done and held serve. But in reality, to have the franchise best win mark, to be lapping the field in the Western Conference, where you were the 1 seed last year, but it was a 3-way tie, and you were a Devontae Graham Hail Mary away from not getting the number 1 overall seed, to now being 14 and a half games better than the 2 seed. To now having the West number 1 seed locked up and being in the driver's seat for the best record overall. Franchise best in wins, historic net rating, best ever at cross-conference games, like the very best ever at cross-conference games now. It's official. Because even if they lose to Detroit, they'd still only have 2 losses. No team's ever lost less than 3. They're 33-5 on their home court. You run out of ways to really describe what's going on. You run out of ways to say the same thing. I mean, it's like living in Groundhog Day, because the story of tonight was that the Chicago Bulls are red hot. They'd won 7 of their last 10 games. They're playing their best basketball of the season. Josh Giddey's really turned a corner, and he has. All of these things were the story of tonight. All of these things we said about Indiana 2 days ago. Like, the Thunder have been playing teams who've been playing their best basketball, the Clippers. And yet they still win, and oftentimes decidedly so. And tonight they won 145-117 on a night that I think that the biggest takeaway was its defense. You know, we have all these cliches in sports, old adages, mantras, words to live by. Some true, some not so much, but we're just too familiar with the terminology to stop using it. But if there was ever an old wives' tale, if there was ever a mantra, a cliche that you should hope is true, it's that defense wins championships. Because this Thunder team is historically good defensively. They're historically elite defensively. And tonight they showed you the value in that. And so in tonight's game, the value of it was you're going to look at this box score, and if you didn't get around to watching this game, you see 145 points. You see that they made 53% of their shots from the floor and 53.5% of their shots from three, technically shooting better from three than the floor. And you would think that they just put on a masterclass of offense and that the offense was humming from the word go. But that's not true. That's just not true. They started out slow offensively. But guess what? The slow start offensively didn't only not doom them. The slow start offensively, was they were able to still control the lead with only one lead change in one tie. And it was at the very start of the game when they got down 2-0. Like from the 2-0 mark on, the Thunder were able to control this game with a lead because of its defense. And the defense buys you time. It affords you mistakes. It increases your margin of error on the offensive end because they're not scoring either. And eventually you hope that in the course of a 48-minute game times 7, because you're going to, you have 7 chances here, a 7-game series ideally, that 4 times out of 7, your defense will let you hang around enough to get the dam to break offensively, to go on runs good enough to win games. And that's what happened tonight. The Thunder got up by 10 at the tail end of the fourth, but it was immediately sliced down to about 5, cut in half. Then back up to 10 at the end of the first and start of the third. Then sliced down a tad into single digits, and then it started to snowball. Avalanche, if you will, which is the terminology we've been using since November on this team. It's not so funny as it was back in November for a lot of you in the comments now. And you just look at the game chart of how it's a literal snowball effect of their defense suffocated Chicago, frustrated Chicago, flustered Chicago, outright embarrassed Chicago. And a team who's red hot, a team who's pulled off big wins. They swept the Lakers. Couldn't even compete. Not only couldn't compete, didn't look like they were playing the same sport. And that's what allowed the Thunder to eventually accumulate a 43-point lead and run away with this game. Only dwindled down by garbage time minutes because the entire fourth quarter was rendered garbage time, and none of the Thunder starters played in that final frame because of such. And the fact that this Thunder team can turn it on the defensive end, even on a monoculous night like this one, a mundane Monday against the Chicago Bulls, they were able to get sized up for this game and go and do that on the defensive end. You better hope that defense wins championships. And if you believe in that mantra, clear your calendars for June. Make sure you're in Bricktown at the end of the month. At the end of the month of June, and get ready for a parade because this team will be able to win a championship. And the thing about the defense is it travels with you. A large part of it is a constant versus a variable. A large part of it is just your athleticism / talent level, mainly your energy level, effort level, and engagement level, and your emphasis on it. And the Thunder check all those boxes, top to bottom, every single night, even on nights where they can easily and passably not do the dirty work. If they didn't show up to do the dirty work tonight, nobody would care. Nobody would complain. Nobody would think anything of it. But they did, because that's their identity, because that's what they're built on, because that's what frees up the rest of it. The dirty work on the defensive end makes for the highlight credit on the offensive end for this Thunder team. They turned Chicago over 19 times. And if you include garbage time even, Chicago shot 45% from the floor and 31% from deep and had 19 turnovers. Like, this was a game where the Thunder just shut down the Bulls and made them look like the Windy City Bulls. Kobe White was flopping all over the court, Like he was trying to win a Grammy and an Oscar all at one time, trying to get the old what's that award called? Where you bundle them all together, right? Where you bundle a Tony and an Oscar and a Grammy and a whatever the trifecta is called. Trying to win all of it, flopping around like a fish out of water. En route to 7 points on 40% shooting for a guy who's been electrifying for Chicago. The end result, stat line wise, was good for Josh Giddey: 15 points, 10 assists, 8 rebounds. But it was coupled with 4 turnovers. It was coupled with 40% shooting from the floor. It was coupled with a minus 24 when he's on the floor, minus 19 when Kobe White's on the floor, minus 32 whenever Patrick Williams is on the floor. Because these guys just got ran out of the gym. They could not compete. And think about that. Think of how competitive Chicago has been, and yet they step on the floor with Oklahoma City, and it looks like an entirely different sport. How competitive Chicago's been, to clarify, after the All-Star break. And so every game that passes, we're like, okay, this is the game. This is the game where it can kind of be fun. This is the game where you're getting a really hot team. You've already got everything locked up. Let's see a fun, competitive game. No. The Thunder just continue to dominate and squeeze the life out of the opponents. And it starts with the defense. And that defense will be played just as it was a year ago in the playoffs, regardless of experience, of age, of any of that. They're going to do this defensively in the playoffs. And it's going to be difficult to beat this team 4 out of 7 times, as we continue to see throughout the year. Coming up, let's talk about the Thunder individually. Jalen Williams, I thought, had a really good night. SGA showed you some more of his evolution. Lou Dort, Isaiah Joe was able to toss in threes left and right. We'll talk about it all coming up. But first, I want to say right now, but our good friends over at Monarch Money, go check them out today at Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track of your money. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO. It gives you the full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Make sure you check it out today, because managing money with your partner is smoother than ever before. You can track your shared accounts and your personal accounts all in one place, and set goals and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Also want to tell you right now about our good friends over at Prize Picks, and it's available to you in Oklahoma. Yes, Prize Picks is available in Oklahoma, and baseball season's underway. It's in full swing. There's no better place to get on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash, whether it's strikeouts or RBIs or first inning runs. Prize Picks keeps you engaged and every game exciting, and you can even do cross-sport entries. You can take the more option on Bobby Witt Jr. hits and the more option on SGA points. Put it together. If you're right on both, big time cash out at Prize Picks. Go download the app and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. Well, this game really took a turn for Garbage Timeville early on. It got late early for the Chicago Bulls, in large part, of course, due to SGA, who had 27 points, scored the first 6 points of this game, had 2 blocks, 12 assists, and shot 64% from the floor, 2 for 2 from 3, and 7 for 7 at the free throw line. I think that the 12 assists is this number that jumps out at you clearly, and it just continues to show both the evolution of Shai's game and also what the pictures look like when these guys are hitting from beyond the arc. We mentioned that they hit 53.5% of their three-pointers en route to 23 makes. But Shai as a passer has gotten a lot better and a lot more creative. And creative not in the sense of, he's not doing behind the back passes and he's not doing these crazy highlight passes, but creative in the sense of what he believes is a pass he can make to create an advantage for the Thunder. Oftentimes, even a year ago, but especially a couple years ago, it felt like Shai was passing to get off the ball, was passing to kind of like reset the possession, was passing because there was nothing there. This season, you're seeing him throw skip passes more to an open guy across the court to knock down an open shot. You're seeing him now realize how he's bending the defense on the back end and guys can cut behind them and he can drop the pass off in between two guys on the bounce and get easy 2 points for the Thunder. You're seeing him put guys in situations to score rather than just simply moving the ball or just simply getting off the ball or just simply moving along a possession. He's being able to generate points off of his gravity, which is what rewards him with 12 assists. And obviously it takes two to tango. So the guys have to hit their shots too for these assists to start racking up, and they hit their shots tonight. But it's easier to hit your shots if you get put in a more advantageous position. And this is something that Shai's talked about before of all season long. He's been peppered by questions, mainly by friend of the show, Joel Lorenzi, about the Dallas Mavericks series and about kind of lessons that you learn in the playoffs and things like that. And one of the biggest takeaways from Shai has been, that he felt like he could have done a better job in the regular season of preparing his guys for the playoffs. And you take that quote and you wonder, and you wonder how you can apply that into what he's doing. I think that this might be a way that you can apply that, where he's making guys better by these 12 assists in the sense of how these assists are being racked up and the way that we just illustrated, and still got 27 points. And a key part of the assist numbers was the fact that Chicago couldn't guard him, because no one on Chicago, no one wearing red tonight could stop Shai from turning the corner and getting downhill. He scores the first 6 points. He has double digits in a blank. Like, Shai was just phenomenal in this game as a scorer, which clearly is going to bend your defense, clearly going to make you try to shade towards Shai more. And as you shade that way, as Mark Dignault always says, even about this all-time great Thunder team, you can't take away everything. So yeah, if you want to shade and try to take away Shai drives, well, then you open yourself to be susceptible to the pass and to open shots from his teammates. And tonight they knocked him down and allowed the Thunder to be a runaway train in this game. Plus 29 for SGA on the single game plus minus. Jalen Williams, his co-star, I thought was really good. 23 points in this one, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 60% from the floor, 4 for 7 from 3. And he made 3 trips to the free throw line in 24 minutes. A growing trend for him has been getting more free throws, more free throw attempts over the last few games. And so I asked him about it after the game, and he told me that, what's helped him really is obviously attacking downhill harder, playing with more force, so to say, playing downhill harder, but also just letting it go, like letting go the idea of needing free throws. But at some point, like if you drive to the rim full force, drive to the rim hard, you put the decision in their hands and you kind of force them to call it. So yes, he wasn't getting free throws early on this season, but like his relentless nature of attacking downhill has changed. And it goes back to whenever I asked Mark about this on the Pacers game. And Mark was saying how, J-Dub has shown signs of being a guy who can command an offense, who can get downhill, which opens up his playmaking. But the Pacers game was a really good stretch, and his best stretch, Mark argued, of his career to date, of putting it all together for a sustained period of time. I think he did a good job building on that. The box score is not as gaudy as it would have been had he been forced to play his normal 30-something minutes, because he had 23 points in 24 minutes. But taking that into account, this was a really good game from J-Dub. And similarly to Shai, they could not stop J-Dub from getting to the paint. And it was shots at the rim, but it was also getting into the deep paint, rising up for mid-range jumpers, specifically along that baseline. He did it a ton. Once against Josh Giddey. Like, J-Dub was just fantastic. And then you lump onto that the 4 for 7 from 3, and you have this well-rounded 3-level score tonight from J-Dub. And I think that you should welcome the fact that a second-year guy in a second-year playoffs is probably going to be inconsistent. It's unrealistic to expect J-Dub, and if he does do this, he'd be an outlier. That in his second ever playoff run, he's going to put these games together every single time that he steps on the floor in the playoffs. But then you flip it and say, well, can he do this 4 out of 7 times? Can he do this 4 times before the other team gets the better of the Thunder 4 times? And if you bottled up this week, the answer would be yes. Like, this week has been a really impressive stretch from him, especially considering the return from the injury. So I think that J-Dub is really playing his best basketball. This Thunder team, arguably, which is crazy because they've won 63 games, so you have a lot to pick from. But this Thunder team, obviously, is playing their best basketball right now at the end of the season when you want to be peaking, when you want to be playing at your best clip. They're doing it. And then you have to talk about Isaiah Joe, who dropped in 31 points. 31 points, 58% shooting from the floor, 57% from 3. Because he went 8 for 14 from 3. 3 for 3 at the free throw line. 1 steal. He had 2 rebounds, but he's really been a force. I'm sorry. Yeah, he had 6 rebounds. I'm sorry. Was Kenrich Williams. 2 rebounds for Isaiah Joe. He's really been a force on the defensive glass and in the passing lanes. And he talked about the pride that he takes, especially kind of being labeled an undersized guy, to improve on that end of the floor. And he has improved. This is a very good developmental story for the Thunder. And I think that sometimes it gets cast aside as like, well, how did the Sixers not know that they had this great player? They just waived him? It's like, he was always like, obviously he could have played well for the Sixers, but he was always a good shooter. But the defense, with all due respect to Isaiah Joe, has came a long way in Oklahoma City. A long way. Where he went from an average at best, and I would argue below average defender, to now he's at worst an above average defender, and at best a good defender who can stay attached to you at all times, make you play in a phone booth. Yeah, he's undersized, but whenever he's underneath you with leverage, like, it's still hard to shoot over him, and he's funneling you while harassing you into the traffic and the paint that the Thunder have there. So, like, the Thunder deserve credit for the developmental story of Isaiah Joe, and not just developing his defense, but even his shooting from year to year, how it's gotten better. And I'm not talking percentages. I think that sometimes we get lost in the percentages. If you are bored today on a Thunder off day, or if you're bored tomorrow waiting for a Thunder game that won't start until, the cows come home. Well, I guess, does technically every game not start till the cows come home? Because don't cows come home at sundown? And thus, every 7 o'clock tip would be likely when the cows are already in bed. Nonetheless, though, we should be in bed by the time the Pistons game tips off. It's going to be 8:30. So if you're bored between now and then, the point being, go and watch Isaiah Joe's 3-point attempts this year. Then go watch a highlight package of last year's 3-point attempts from Isaiah Joe. They're completely different shots. They're shots that you need someone to take and make in the playoffs. He's a more movement shooter this season, which did hamper his percentage at the start of the year. But now that he's hitting them and has been for the last calendar year, since Jan 1, like, it shows progression. So it's like the Thunder deserve a lot of credit for Isaiah Joe's development. I think that sometimes it's just like, well, how the silly Sixers not know what they had? It's like, because they didn't have this version of Isaiah Joe. It's a credit to Isaiah Joe's work ethic. It's a credit to the Thunder's developmental story. You could argue that the Sixers should have let him try to grow into this player and not cut him, but this is not Sixers Joe. This is Thunder Joe. That'd be a great coffee brand, Thunder. Don't got to pay me any royalties for it, but if you want to market Isaiah Joe with his own coffee brand as this whole Cup of Joe nickname is catching on, feel free. Feel free. If anyone from the Thunder is listening, I don't know if they are, feel free to take that idea and run with it for Isaiah Joe. Nonetheless, Isaiah Joe, really good. Really good. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but it certainly would be a hot cup of Joe. Coming up, let's talk about the rest of this Bulls game and get you set for what's coming ahead on Locked On Thunder. But first, I want to say right now, about our good friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like watching basketball live. The energy from the crowd, the sound of the sneakers on the hardwood, maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. Jada Coleman was in attendance tonight from the famed OU softball squads. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. Check them out today and have peace of mind because you're going to get a view from your seat before you buy. No surprise fees and the lowest prices guaranteed. You can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets and check out Game Time with Game Time Picks by downloading the Game Time app, creating your account, and using code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create your account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? Game Time. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you. Comment, subscribe, like, review down below. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Styles. And let's talk about this Thunder game. Kenrich Williams, 2 for 3 from 3, 18 minutes of really good basketball. Again, I think Kenrich Williams could be a guy who steps up in the playoffs a little bit just because, like, he played 18 minutes tonight. Technically 19 because he played 18. But this is not a game for Kenrich Williams, like a blowout game. Like you really see his value in close games, but you see his value all the time if you're paying attention. But it's especially recognizable in close games. In the last 7 games, Kenrich Williams, 13 for 20 from 3, 65% shooter from 3 over the last 7 games. Plus, you know what he does in those small ball lineups. He had 6 rebounds tonight, 2 assists, 10 points. And really helped this team out. It did have a wedgie as well, so shout out to No Dunks for the wedgie from Kenrich Williams. Cason Wallace 2 for 4 from 3. Caruso 1 for 2 from 3. Caruso also had 2 steals. Wallace had 3 steals on a block to add into the defensive menace category that we talked about in segment number 1. Lou Dort 3 for 5 and just frustrated everyone on the Chicago Bulls. It felt like Lou Dort was everywhere all at once, defending every single person on the floor. Like, Lou Dort is such an elite defender. And then Chet Holmgren was the only player who you can say struggled tonight. 2 for 7 from the floor, 1 for 2 from 3. And if he just had slightly better footing on a transition opportunity, he would have increased that from 3 to 2 for 3 because the only reason it was taken off the board is because he stepped out of bounds on the pass. So the 3-point shot actually looked good tonight. It was everything else that didn't look great from an offensive perspective. Look, I get asked sometimes about what I think of Chet. Like, it depends how you're viewing Chet. Are you viewing Chet from the prism of a guy who broke his hip on November 10th? Or are you viewing him from the prism of a guy who was the number 2 overall pick and November 9th through, October 1st through November 9th look like an all-star? Like, it depends what prism you're viewing him from. If you have the context of a guy who broke his hip, yeah, sometimes he does look gassed. Sometimes he does lack in mobility a little bit because he broke his hip on November 10th. Like, yeah. Defensively, I still would say that we've seen a lot of great things from Chet. Offensively, it's been hit or miss. Like, offensively, he's had really good games. Like, I think back to that Boston game, which was stellar. And he's had some quieter offensive nights and some inefficient offensive nights. And some nights where he's turned the ball over because he's losing his footing or because he's losing his loose dribble. And then he's missing shots on top of that to make it feel even worse. Guys, he broke his hip. So it's like, yeah, Chet's going to have games where you look at the box score and like, that's not very good. And tonight wasn't very good offensively. But defensively, he's still more than impactful. And he had the 6 rebounds. He had he had the defensive presence in the paint to where he was deterring shots without getting blocks or steals, so it's not showing up in the stat sheet, but you go watch it and guys aren't taking shots at their end because of Chet. He's closing out very well. He had 3 assists to go along with it, offensively with the 3 assists. And it's going to come down to being a make or miss league. Like, some of those shots that he got blocked by Buzelis, like he's been blocked a little bit more since he's came back from the hip injury. I don't know that the two are correlated, but like, that's something that's happened to Chet. Like, he's going to either make these mid-range shots or he's not. But yeah, I mean, there's been times where you can see that this is a guy who broke his hip November 10th. There's been times where you are sitting there just struck in awe of how great he looks because he broke his hip on November 10th. Basically, I said this. Chet Holmgren, even last year, whenever he was the picture of health, 82 games played, etc. You look at his splits, he was way better with time off than he was, like with elongated time off, more than 1 day in between games than otherwise. Even last year when he played every single game. The playoffs, have natural breaks. They're going to have a whole week off into the playoffs. They're going to have 2 days off between every game in the first round, minimum a day off in between every game from there forward. And obviously mostly a couple days, especially during travel days. But, he's going to benefit from that rest, I think, a whole ton. But at the end of the day, much like J-Dub, like regardless of the injury, this is still a second year in the playoffs kind of guy coming up here in the playoffs. He's going to have games like this where he's not playing particularly well offensively, especially because of his injury. We'll never know what he would have looked like this season without the injury because, again, before November 10th, he looked like an all-star, looked like a borderline All-NBA guy before November 10th. But, yeah, this is part of the process of a return to performance, as Mark would say. He's not perfectly back at perfect peak Chet return to performance. That's, I think, fair to say. But also, again, like how you take Chet's season to date, how you take this outcome from Chet is more about how you're viewing it, of like what should he be off of a hip injury, an injury that we've never seen before in the NBA. I think he was good tonight in terms of impact level. I don't think his box score was good. I don't think that his shooting was necessarily good because he went 2 for 7. But I think his impact was still a winning impact. And you need winning impact players to win in the playoffs. So, like, I think that Chet still holds value because if he's not harming you on the floor, which Chet, no matter what the box score looks like in any of these games, has never once harmed this Thunder team on the floor. As long as Chet's not harming you on the floor, which he is not, then this is a guy who's capable of massive games, even post-hip injury, like the massive game in Boston. And you do have to always have this qualifier of, we know that Chet Holmgren, the data right now would suggest, and the eye test at least would suggest, Chet Holmgren is at his best through his first 2 NBA seasons when he's the lone big on the floor. But you have to play double bigs right now because you're playing catch up from all the lost time. So in the playoffs, like, this is a situation where we could be looking at the results and being like, why did we ever overthink this? Like, obviously, Chet's going to be great whenever he's in a more familiar role. Clearly. We just dissected a whole other player about roles. Like, Chet in a role of the lone center has still been good post-hip injury, pre-hip injury, HI and pre-HI and post-HI. And he'll be good again. Like, he's going to have great games. Tonight, not a better night, and that's okay for Chet Holmgren, especially whenever his teammates are picking him up like this, especially like Isaiah Joe did. 31 points, ties a season high, almost had his career high, 33 in this one, but instead he had 31. And now the Thunder get to move on and take on the Detroit Pistons in a very late game, where we'll still have a post-game podcast for you. Coming up on this show, we have our Western Conference squad shows, a roundtable between every Western Conference host, which was a lot of fun to record. Spoiler alert, we've already recorded it. It's coming out on Tuesday night for Wednesday's show. So go listen to that. Until next time, be good to one another.